The smooth breakfast.
Get quick access to loans from Page Financials. Page Financials, taking you further.
And good morning to you once more, Lagos. You're tuned in and listening to Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. It's with Valentine.
And it's with Folu.
And joining us in the studio this morning for detailed newspaper analysis, we have Devoe Okorie. Good morning, Devoe.
Good morning, Lagos. A coup offering time.
We're going to get into that right about now. As we get into the stories this morning, do remember join us in conversation, whether it's up on our YouTube live stream and we say hello to everybody out there, or whether it's by sending us messages on our WhatsApp number, which is 0809 4440981, and also tweet at us. All you have to do is use the hashtag freshlypressed981. So without further ado, let's get into the first story. Let's talk about police raids most recently that have been going on. From the Vanguard newspaper, police management team have visited Edwin Clark over the raid on the Asokoro residence of the former Federal Commissioner for Information and South leader. Now, apparently this raid was the result of false information given by a false informant that they've said, listen, we're going to parade this false informant. They are also sanctioning the 4 police personnel that participated actively in the search, and they seem to be doing everything possible to just say, yeah, sorry. What is the story?
It's interesting as to what happened. They were raided by about 6 policemen with a search warrant who actually approached the elder statesman and told them that they were on search. That they were holding weapons on behalf of militants, sponsoring gun running and all of that. And so they therefore raided his house to find out what they could that was incriminating against him. Now, that's the more or less the surface of the story. Now, let's look at the larger picture.
Yes.
Many people have reacted. The IG has already come out to state that they were not part of it, that he didn't issue any search warrant on him. So first of all, let's
Where
start
did they
from
get
where
it?
it counts. Where are the consequences?
Thank
How
you.
do some of your men, even if he said they should detain them, I think detention is just
It's
a
very
slap on the
mild.
wrist.
It's a very mild
How
reaction.
do you go about violating people's rights without any the IG saying that he was not? So someone has gone above, and they said they got it from the Abuja courts. Now, someone needs consequences. Heads need to roll. Administration, and create the right image for itself. Have gone, we call it most cases where they're intimidating Nigerians. Now, this is an elder statesman. It also can be where the Joe Youth Council was stating that they were intimidating opposing forces. There's no democracy without dissent. That is true, and that must be defended. So whether you are on the side of the government or you speak against them, that is no reason. It does not warrant any intimidation from any government institution. And this is a 91 league. How much could he be gun running at 91? What are you really saying about him? This is someone you could have easily called. You called for this level of treatment. Who are become level of regard? Who? One of the things about this administration that I'm not comfortable with is the fact that at every point in time, when something happens that's always a gaffe one way or the other, there's a claim or there's we're not aware, we
There's
don't
a
know what's
distancing from the
there's a
situation.
no,
That's
you need
just
to
not
take
appropriate,
responsibility. You need to arrest the developments going on within your own administration. That's how we know you have it together.
Devoe, thank you very much for that. It does feel like this administration has let a lot of things slide, and it does feel that they continuously trying to distance themselves from the rather public gaffes of their security apparatus. But we move on. Up next, let's talk about returning stolen artifacts. Just as Dorothy's slippers reappeared, perhaps some of our stolen artifacts will also find their way home. Return stolen artifacts, the Benin Monarch tells the United Kingdom. So that's Oba of Benin, Oba Eware II. He's reiterated his call on the British government to return all the artifacts that were stolen during the invasion of the Benin Kingdom by British troops in 1897. He talks about the emotional connection with the Benin people, needing the items to come back home. But when I look look at this, one of the concerns, Devoe, and is a continuing concern not just for Benin artifacts but really globally, is that our museums are either not present or are in deplorable form, which is a big issue. And he's only just now, after reiterating a second call for artifacts to come back, saying, "Oh, but we do welcome the idea of helping out with a museum." Isn't that one of the first things that perhaps should be happening? Where are these artifacts supposed to be returned to? And of course, there is the bigger problem of the fact that the British continue to display clearly stolen items. Your thoughts?
Now, respectfully, yes, it's in his duty to see that some of these precious, well-cherished artifacts do come back. However, the director of the British Museums actually was here on that account. So it was just, would I say it, likely timing of both calls to return, and also that they were here to also assist in building a museum locally, which would have helped them store some of them if and when they decide to return them. Secondly, and I think this is where it really matters, there's only how much you can hold on to the past. In some ways, because we're not completely judicial, completely straight with how we handled those artifacts and how they got over. It's not like they came at gunpoint and literally took them. Some of us played roles in how.
But there were also
yes,
gunpoints
there was a
involved.
raid. There was gunpoints
I'm
at
like,
some.
let's not forget.
But
were
the
guns.
major proportion of them were filtered away through backside deals. Now. I expected that because the Oba did mention that they're resuscitating the guild of broadcasters, those who were responsible.
Which is a huge deal.
Yes, this is what I was looking at all the while. If we had that capacity before, if we had such heavenly skills to create some of those artifacts, it can still continue.
Yeah.
That art craft can be honed, it should have been passed on to new generations who would take it up and create more. We can't continue just holding on to what was built in the 19 or the 1600s.
Now, the only thing I would love for you to comment a little bit on the role that culture plays in this, because we do like talking a lot about culture in this part of the world, but a lot of the time people talk about culture as though it's just the language. They forget this history. Also looking at the role that religion, specifically Christianity and Islam, play in what some people had called the demise of a lot of our cultural history, because there are a lot of people who still feel that there are negative attachments to this sort of work, to the deep history and the deep roots and the deep culture, not just of the Benin people, but again, we see it across
all
the nation.
over. There are obviously new sentiments that work against the further growth of the culture that we've had from time immemorial. Now,
the culture of our ancestors.
Yes, the Oba did mention that there would be a launch of a red book, which was supposed to be a book that goes into the Benin culture and how it had come and how it existed till date, so that historians and academicians world over can cue into it. Likewise, like we mentioned in the handicraft, it's not just the Benin bronzes that are special. They also have woodworks. If you know the lost, what they call them, the lost woodworks of Ben. Now, these are all things that, from generations you pass down one skill to the next, and then another one grows. So I'm not even looking forward to the museum. I am looking forward to this guild coming back to life.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the instruments. I'm looking forward to the trainings. I'm looking forward to the whole cultural regeneration that would come from re-equipping these people to be able to bring back what would be referred to as lost glory, because they had it.
And will build its own economy as it grows.
Of course.
Thank you very much for that, Devoe. Still staying on the news topics, and if you are just joining us, welcome. It's Freshly Pressed 981. Join the conversation up on our YouTube live stream or tweet at us. Use the hashtag Freshly Pressed 981. Up next, we're talking about church donations and the
Offering time.
billions, really offering time. So the Guardian newspaper gives us this headline: 1.6 billion naira church donation claim is untrue, the EFCC is insisting. Now let's cast our minds back and refer to the fact that the EFCC have been prosecuting a former aide of President Goodluck, Jonathan, for about 1.6 billion naira. That's Dudafa, they're saying, and alongside also a banker who was supposed to be his account officer at Heritage, one Joseph Wejo. Now, in their defense, the respondents have said, listen, this 1.6 is actually donation to church. It was to build, excuse me, it was part of the money, not the whole money, part of the money donated to Jonathan's church in Otuoke to build St. Stephen's Youth Development Center. Devoe, this is 1.6 billion naira. I would like to know what this development center looks like and if it's paved of gold. But what are your thoughts on this story, though? Especially the EFCC saying that this is entirely untrue. Is it quite possible or likely that this money was, in fact, given to the church?
Well, this is a very handsome, beautiful offering.
1.6 billion.
Yes, you know when they say offering time, the Christians usually say blessing time.
Yep.
Yeah, so some people have obviously been blessed here, and this blessing is under contention. We can't speak much than beyond the facts that have been presented because the case is still under adjudication.
Yes.
However, the EFCC is still querying the fact that this money moved from between the church and a certain company that was related to Dudafa, who has owned up and said that only his principal, which is where it pulls
It
in
gets
the
tricky.
ex-president,
Yes.
only him can answer to that extent. Now, I'm looking beyond the court case because at the end of the day, I think they can follow the money and it's easy to find out exactly how this happened. But I'm looking at the fact that religious bodies, whether saintly or unsaintly, are being tied to funds that are under such contest, okay? I'm looking at the fact that, there was a time when we were referring to these religious bodies announcing their accounts, which was heavily criticized.
Yeah.
It's because of instances like this whereby funds, in quotes, allegedly illicit funds can become, can find their way into religious bodies to nest away and to find cover. If that is the new way of hiding funds, then we need to be careful. We
Religious
need to be
bodies need
very
to pay
careful,
attention.
yes. And the religious bodies need to be aware, or in some way, as they said, and that's why they insisted, publish your accounts so that we
Absolutely.
can be sure that you are transparent in all your dealings.
And just being sensitive, you know the members of your congregation somewhat. 1.6 billion is not
No,
beans
it's not.
for anybody
It's not.
from anywhere. Anyways, we continue. Up next, let's talk about people falling prey to fake recruitment agencies. The story is from the Guardian newspaper, and it's one that is echoed across the country at different times. This is just particularly sad, as the Nigerian Immigration Service have handed over the fake recruitment kingpin to the ICPC, and the NSDC have cautioned job seekers on sham employments. So one Mohammed Rabiu Isa, 48, in Kano, has been handed over for alleged employment racketeering. Now, he swindled unsuspecting job seekers with fake unemployment letters, defrauding up to 6 persons of 900,000 naira by promising them employment with the NIS at the cost of 150,000 naira each. Devoe, people are still getting caught in this web of pay us some money and you'll get a job. Doesn't it seem to almost defeat the point of getting a job which is to earn you money, and instead you're shelling out, 150,000 naira is a lot of money. What are your thoughts on this story?
And to think that people believe that they can buy jobs.
You can't purchase it.
Nevertheless, desperation is the beginning of blindness, and that's why this has happened. And where's this desperation coming from? It's not a far cry, because the economy has struggled for a while, and many people have been out of jobs. So you see people going up way above the call of recruitments into seeing themselves pay. 150 is even small. If you hear the figures I hear as to what people do just to get jobs, yes, you would be shocked, and you would wonder, can your job even pay back the amount
you've paid?
Yes, that
to
you've
secure
used
it.
to secure it. Now, if many people check the social media, you will see a lot of these scams that are ongoing, of people claiming not just to be selling cars at very low prices. Some of them are telling them that various federal government institutions, between the customs, immigration, the police, the army, are all recruiting, and that they should contact a certain number. And it looks so simple.
And they go as far as impersonating some
Yes,
individuals as
they even wear their uniforms, like you mentioned. Sometimes there are real officers who maybe have left the system, who come back to give it some level of authenticity.
Credibility.
Yes, and then
Right.
they send text messages, and a lot of unsuspecting Nigerians fall for these things. This doesn't just happen for recruitment; it also happens with housing.
Yes.
So I'm happy that they were able to fish this culprit out, and he has been handed over to the ICPC and the NCDC for prosecution. He's been released on administrative bail, which he would be charged to court very soon. But what I would say is this. I also want to enjoin some of the federal government institutions to keep an open eye and to always publish their own channels of recruitment.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, this, it's not just even in pain of the amounts to security. Remember how the last recruitment, there was a rush, there was on immigration, and people
Stampede.
died. There was a stampede. This is a lot of desperation. People are hungry to get employed. So let's not allow opportunities for people to be taken advantage of because of that.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. We have a message here on WhatsApp from Comrade Ifenuga. It says, I do not even understand who's in charge of the federal government. No one is really ready to take responsibility. IGP denies authorizing the invasion of Pa Edwin Clark's house. It's, yeah. Bengos here says that the police raided Pa Edwin Clark's house isn't an issue to me because nobody should be above the law. But what appears absolutely ridiculous to me is the denial of the IGP on the raid. If it is true that the IGP was oblivious of the raid, then something is definitely wrong in the country. Who exactly is in charge? It seems the question is, resonating among a lot of people. Now we'll have this next story from ThisDay newspaper that says 5.8 billion naira unpaid allowances, National Assembly's legislative aides threaten showdown. So it seems that National Assembly legislative aides yesterday embarked on a peaceful protest to drive home the alleged claims of unpaid allowances. They said that they've been expected to, beyond the allowances they're expected to be paid, they're expected to be sent for training every year. As a form of capacity building, totaling about 1 billion naira. And if you look at the allowances, in some quarters it's been reported that the allowances actually sometimes is 3 times what the assembly members themselves earn. Is there a breakdown of communication, or what could be the case? Because everybody seems to be resorting to protest these days to drive home their claim, and you would assume they have heads they can reach out to. You know?
Well, if you've not been paid for nearly 3 years, you should protest.
Right.
You should have protested way before now, not when they're on holiday.
But that's a long time for an issue to still be hanging.
Yes, but some way, somehow, the National Assembly senior officers have been able to douse the tension. So the legislative aides who were protesting that they're aides and not slaves did claim that they're owed 2 allowances majorly. One, that's the duty tour allowance. And then which comes to about 2 billion, and then the training allowance, which they're supposed to get about 1 billion per year, and since it's been 3 years, that's why it came to about 3 billion.
Yes.
And that even though they receive 250 million quarterly in terms of their budgetary provision, they're meant to go on training at least once a year. Since 2015, none of them have gone on any training. Now, this is similar to the ASU case,
Yes.
similar from a perspective to the doctor's allowances issue. It's the same old story of not being able to meet up with our obligations. And in most cases, where somebody within that same system is getting theirs, then you shouldn't be left out. So, they're saying that they would keep the assembly shut if it's not attended to. I don't know how far they will be able to carry that out because we're entering election season. Promises will be made, exchanges will be received. So we hope that the National Assembly, who we refer to as the fat cats, do ensure that the not even crumbs, that what is due to their own staff are given to them.
I have to say this slogan is very catchy. AIDS, not slaves.
Yeah, I know. Very
Just
catchy slogan.
let the young people go on training. Old people.
All right, so I have this next story from Punch newspaper. Police grill Fani-Kayode over anti-Fulani herdsmen article. In this article, he called a lot of names, actually named some state governors and some other heads of government agencies. The Nigeria police, in a reaction on Tuesday, grilled the former Minister of Aviation. They invited him for an interview. Fani-Kayode said after that meeting, the essay, by the way, was titled 5 Useful Idiots and the Spirit of the Cursed Slave. And he said after that interaction with the police, that's what he called it, that it was peaceful, it was very cordial, and then but that he had no regrets about that essay.
Well, we know our what do you call it? He's a good friend of the media. That is Fani-Kayode, who was ex-communication director for the Jonathan campaign. Now, as you know, he is referred to as vociferous when it comes to the use of his pen. And in his article that was published in March,
Yes.
he spoke heavily against what he claimed the Fulani hegemony and the terrorism altogether. Now, on one hand, I look at the literal aspect as to say, can people not write anymore? Why are they being interrogated? Of what import was interrogation? Well, we do know that there is a law against fake news, also a law on inciting the public. But the truth is, and let me say that again, the truth, you see, you can't wipe the truth away by the law.
Yes.
People need to discuss intelligently what has been happening and have an understanding of where it's coming from. And his article, he claimed he was heavily against the spin that was coming, one, from the former governor of Plateau State, Lalong, who mentioned that the herdsmen attacks were just
A family issue.
No. He mentioned that
he
it was
stated that in the
a
article.
refusal of them to abolish the anti-grazing law.
That's one.
Two, he was against the spin that came from the Kogi State governor that it was a family affair among indigents, and which is totally not true.
Yeah.
Then thirdly, Prince Tony Momo, he was against it, saying that it was about tribal politics. All these are spins that have come around this issue. And I think many people, you and I, who live not just here in Lagos, but those that live in those parts, understand the reality of what has happened. The president has asked the media to be to accommodate the history that has happened between the attacks. And yes, we understand that there's history to it, but it's not the way it's being told. There are culprits, there are attacks, people are dying, and to a large extent there have been no consequences.
And do you reckon that the government is, by this kind of moves, trying to not necessarily douse the tension alone, but it just restricts
Trying
stop
to
people from talking so
intimidate
much?
and try and keep such news down. That's why I said
the
you
wraps.
cannot wrap the truth under a sheet of paper. People need to discuss intelligently. If we've been losing human beings who are our own citizens, then we need to get to the bottom of it.
You're right.
We've got a few messages that are coming up on Twitter. Chika Ajina says the call by the Oba of Benin to the United Kingdom to return all the stolen artifacts is a welcome development. And when this news first broke, the thing that struck my mind, he says, was the movie Invasion, 1897 by Lancelot.
Yes, sir.
Interesting. Steve Obiakos says, that's a rubbish story there from Dudafa. The court surely needs to do the needful, though Nigerians get poorer and poorer, even as these billions are being recovered. Awal Bolarewa Durojai says, religious bodies should retain their tax-exempt status only to the extent that they're able to demonstrate through independently verifiable means, that is an audit, that their activities are indeed non-profit. And Henry Manuel echoes that on WhatsApp by saying, this donation thing is why I don't understand the reason that we threw away Jim Obaze's updated financial reporting requirements for non-profit. But what do I know?
We're all still asking the same question now from Vanguard newspaper. Some young man, interesting, EFCC impostor attempts to defraud Adamawa House majority leader. In a brazen attempt to somewhat intimidate this majority leader, the middle-aged man identified himself as Simon Voki. He actually called himself Agent Simon Voki. He posed as an official of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, went to the office of the Adamawa State House of Assembly member, Mr. Hassan Abaguma, and tried to intimidate him and told him there were charges against him from the EFCC. But reacting, the Adamawa State House of Assembly member called his friends, quote unquote, the EFCC, and verified the identity, and then put him on speaker and asked some questions, but the guy could not live up to his claims.
He was busted. Yes.
Busted.
So I sometimes, as they say, why watch Nollywood when you can just follow our politicians?
Listen.
I mean, this
highly
has all the
esteemed.
elements of a great Nollywood movie that would have received a so-called award across the weekend. Nevertheless, he attempted to do whatever he was planning, and he was checked just by the fact that by the time they put him on speaker with the real EFCC officers, he became flimsy and clumsy in his answering the
Calling some
questions.
fake names.
Yes, and then they finally arrested him. So it speaks to our ability to remain alert. Also, identification has become an issue, not just amongst the security forces, but a lot of operatives. As you do know, many of them going to, and that's one of the major issues that people had with SARS. That they, first of all, they were not clothed.
Yeah.
They just came in plain clothing, just claiming by the showing of a ID that you won't even get to scrutinize that we are so and so. We're happy that this is being brought, and we're just asking people to keep their eyes open. Every security official must declare who they are in their operations. They have no right withhold their identity. So at every point in time, if you're ever accosted by security officials from any of the organizations, demand their identities.
That's right. The guy's bold though. Moving on now to this next story from Vanguard newspaper. Ozalla Enugu community abolishes Ohu Amadi caste system. So the caste system was abolished on March 31st, 2018. It is an ancient, derogatory and discriminatory practice of Ohu Amadi slave and freeborn prominence practice or fetish practice has been existent prehistoric times, really, so to speak. And then it seems like now those who've been writing these laws and tradition, the custodians, they say, of the culture and tradition, have come together, conducted a ceremony, and abolished it. What are your thoughts, Devoe?
I'm speechless for a few seconds simply because it's sad.
Yes, it
really,
is.
if you understand what is behind this. You know, sometimes we always shout, oh, Trump, America, Britain, Germany, racism, segregation, etc. The Indian, it's right here with us. It's right here with us.
Yeah.
We practice it to the letter. And I'm sure the popular one was the Osu system, still among the eastern parts. In this case, this is their own version. That's the Ohu Amadi. The Ohus are the masters, while the Amadis are...
The Amadis were the masters.
Sorry,
were the masters.
the other way around. While the freeborn, masters the freeborn, the Amadis, and the Ohu were the slaves. Now, it's an old practice whereby the Ohu were meant to remain subservient, and not just subservient. They never actually get a life of liberty and freedom. They cannot intermarry, they cannot mix. In some cases, the integration was completely impossible.
Yeah, and in some cases were used as human sacrifice.
Yes, so they remain lesser. They're not even beings anymore at the end of the day. Now, in this move to try and abolish the system, the community came together in the presence of a lot of religious bodies, and they were saying on behalf of the Christian understanding or the religious understanding that they were agreeing to abolish it. But you see, this is where my issue is. It is not meant to be a move of a religious body.
Thank you.
Under our constitution, freedom of association, freedom of speech, all these are enshrined. These are constitutional rights that every Nigerian is entitled to. What I expect is the politicians and civil society bodies within those locations to defend these rights and ensure that at all times everyone is entitled to the full freedoms of the Constitution. Secondly and lastly, amongst ourselves, whether you come out and claim that you have abolishes, it still rests in the minds. Even till date, you don't know if some of your uncles or your aunties until you decide to get married, and they show up and tell you that person is coming from this
Even
side.
those who live in
We're
cities.
not going to agree. So these hidden segregations that we do have, we need to deal with them because we're not making ourselves better human beings when we subjugate others to our personal sentiments.
Thank you, Devoe.
Thank you very much. And we round up with a couple of messages. Tijani Akane up on our live stream. It says, a great idea. The Benin Kingdom is requesting the return of the ancient artifacts. But a big question is, what if the UK return prototypes? While up on Twitter, Bolinka says, Buhari to the West, return looted funds. Oba to the West, return stolen artifacts. Me to the West, I beg reduce the brain drain and stop awarding Canadian visas to mentally fit Nigerians that can help build the country.
And return them.
All right, we are
Send them
done.
back.
Thank you very much, Devoe. We appreciate your time with us this morning. And thank you to everyone who sent in comments. We're sorry that we couldn't get through to all of them, but you know what the time is like. Moving on, and speaking of time, at 8:15, we will be talking sports inside the locker room, and Tega is ready. So keep listening to Smooth Breakfast with Valentine.
And Folu, good morning.
Quick access. From Page Financials.
Wow.
Thank you,
Page
man.
Financials.
I wish I was in China.
Why? Because of the money that they are sending.